Well, the song Who Am I is probably the best loved and most requested song that my father ever wrote. I think he wrote this song in about 1965, and it was recorded by the Goodman family and just many, many, many other people. It was very, very popular then and has sort of maintained a real popularity. I guess that every concert that I can ever recall being in where my dad was singing, he sang Who Am I? The Goodman family sang it every night, right up until the very last concert that he ever performed. I think it was because the song really struck a chord in people. It was a song about realizing the greatness of God and the grace that He applied to our lives, because really, who are we? Who are we? We're just a little bit of clay, and that God would make this sacrifice of His very Son's life for us. And I know that it came to be written during a period of time when it wasn't long after my father had moved to Kentucky and was reunited there with his family, and they began singing together again. When he came back from Korea, he pursued music again, but he was away from his family and he was away from the Lord, and he was having a measure of success in, I guess you could call it country music, or I don't know what you called it back then, but he sang with the Plainsman Quartet, and he sang on the theme song of North to Alaska, and he did all these different things, and he was sort of making a place for himself, making a name for himself. And then he gave his heart to the Lord, and he felt a calling to be reunited with his family and to sing with his family, and so he left all of that and he came to Kentucky, and I think it was a very humbling experience at first because he was giving up a lot and he was coming there. And I remember when we first came to Kentucky, we moved into the basement of the church there, which the church was not exactly a really fancy place to start with, and we were in the basement, just a few block rooms there for a few weeks until we could find an apartment. And I think that those times were a real time of questioning and seeking God and really trying to find out what it was that God had for my dad and what He wanted him to do with his life. And I think he was wrestling with that, kind of, was this really the right thing to do? I left all this and I was pursuing a dream, and now here I am. And I think that one morning he just looked in the mirror and he realized how proud and how haughty those thoughts were. And I think that God humbled him at that moment, and he looked in the mirror and he said, who am I to be questioning God? Who am I to be questioning what He has for my life? Because, He gave up everything to save me and to save mankind. And it was from those thoughts and that time of humbling before God and really seeking God, and that realization hit him, and that's where the song was born. My dad was involved in secular music many, many years ago, back in the 50s, and a big dream of his was to have Elvis Presley record one of his songs, and he just thought that would be so cool, because Elvis was so big and so famous. He had written some songs that, were sort of in that bag and had hoped that Elvis would record them, and it never happened. But I thought it was really cool that he recorded a gospel album, and he recorded Who Am I? And my dad ran into him somewhere here in Nashville, and he said, man, that's a great song. That's one of my favorite gospel songs. And he said, I'm going to record that on my new gospel album. And he did. And I thought that was really neat that my dad did have that dream come true, but it was in answering the true call of God on his life that that dream came true. And it really bore out the scripture that delight yourself in the Lord, and He'll give you the desires of your heart. It's probably one of the first songs that I ever sang, in public, getting up on the platform and singing in front of people. And back then I just sang it because it was popular and my dad wrote it, and it was kind of expected for me to do one of his songs. But as I matured down through the years, the song became more and more meaningful to me in my own walk with the Lord. And the message never seems to age. It never seems to get old. I've sang it in all of my concerts. People want me to sing it. I always sing it. I recorded the song, actually, on my first solo album. It just has a really special meaning to me, and I always feel sort of connected to my dad when I sing it, so I think I even like singing it more now than ever before. I guess it was just a few weeks before my father passed away that my husband Michael and I had been on the road, and on the way home from the trip, I had been working on a song called Draw Me Near. And I had gone by to visit Dad when we got home and was just kind of spending a little time with him. And we always liked to share songs and what we were working on. Or if we heard a great lyric anywhere, we'd go, oh, man, you got to hear this. We're always in that songwriting kind of mode. And I said, Dad, I've written a new song, and I want to share it with you. And so I told him the lyrics. A weary traveler, I walk this road, so many struggles underneath my load. I've got to let it go before it pulls me to the ground. Could it be I've finally found a place to lay my burden down? Draw me near you, I need your strength. Let me hear you speak the words of peace. Draw me near you, I need your Father love. Come and heal me with your touch and draw me near. And as I spoke the words, I looked up at my dad, and he had these big tears in his eyes, and he said, I think that's about me. I think that song's for me. I had not really thought of it as a literal journey, of someone who was facing the end of their life and crossing into eternity. But I had thought of it when I was writing it as more of an allegory about a spiritual journey and sort of a pilgrim's progress kind of thing. And so it really touched me, especially that something that I, had written that my dad would identify with and find beauty and encouragement in it. He went on to say that he was really glad that we had the time to spend together because he just wanted me to know, in case he never had the opportunity again to tell me, that he was very proud of me, and he was very proud of Michael, my husband. And he said, I'm so glad that you guys have chosen music as your life's work because I loved it so much. And, I just had so many dreams and so many wonderful experiences. And he said, I can remember laying on my back, looking at the stars and listening to the Grand Ole Opry on the radio and thinking someday I want to make music. I want to sound like that. I want to sing like that. I want to write songs. And he said a lot of those dreams came true, and I got to travel and sing with my family and write and record, and it was my whole life. He said, I just feel like that if you and Michael are out there writing and producing and singing, and that, maybe a little bit of pop is out there too, and that my music is going on, and just a little piece of me is out there. And it really touched me, and it was a very sweet moment. But it was sort of getting a little heavy in the room, and I thought I'd lighten things up a little. And I said, yeah, Dad, and as long as we're singing, you can count on the fact that we're going to include one of your songs, too, in every concert. I said, I know you'll like that. And he laughed, and it was really sweet. A lot of people don't know that the Goodmans used to pastor a church there in Kentucky for many years. And during the mid to late 60s, my dad played the organ at our church, and he led the choir. And I can remember standing beside him on the organ bench and singing and kind of participating, and that was kind of the place that I wanted to be, standing by him. And one of the favorites at our church was I Wouldn't Take Nothing for My Journey Now, which my dad also wrote. Actually, there's a really neat story with that song. In our church there in Kentucky, there was a little man by the name of Shorty Carter, and he was just a simple man. He wore overalls to church, and he was an older man. And Anytime we would have some sort of testimony service, he would always stand up and say he never wanted to miss an opportunity to share his testimony. And he would share something that God had done in his life and, just what the Lord meant to him. But he would always close by saying, "And I wouldn't take nothing from a journey now." And he would sit down and, he would kind of give a little wave of his hand as he sat down. And everybody knew Shorty Carter. Everybody in our church knew who Brother Shorty was, and even in the community, a lot of the people were familiar with him and his little signature sign off for his testimony. And one day, my dad just decided to write a song about Shorty and about his testimony, and that's where the song "I Wouldn't Take Nothing from My Journey" came from. And I can remember standing there with my dad on the organ bench and just singing that to the top of my lungs. It wasn't very good, but it was loud. Not long after my father's death, a lot of people, a lot of different artists and stuff, when I would see them, they would say, I miss your dad so much. I miss him, and I miss hearing his voice, and I miss hearing his music, and a lot of his songs started being recorded. Again, the vocal band has recorded several, and several have been used on the Gaither Homecoming series, and just different groups have re-recorded a lot of things that he has written in the past. And Michael and I were talking one day, and I said, I just have this dream of someday going in the studio and taking some of those old masters of my dad's and maybe singing with him, and I think that would be so neat. And we had talked about it quite a lot, and we had never really done anything with the idea or approached anyone or anything. So when this project came together, Homecoming Tributes and Classics, I was approached about doing a song with my dad, and immediately the one that came to mind was "Who Am I?" And it was just really great to go in and have the opportunity to record it and just hear my dad sing again over the big speakers. The girls like to listen to Poppy's tapes. They call him Poppy. But to hear his voice coming over those big speakers in the studio and have it just blaring loud and to get in there and sing with him, it was really a joy. And I hope everybody enjoys it as much as I did, because I had a great time doing it. Hi, this is Tanya Goodman Sykes, and you're listening to Who Am I?, one of the most loved songs that was ever written and recorded by my father, Rusty Goodman.
When I think of how he came so far from glory, came and dwelt among the lowly, such as I, to suffer shame and such disgrace on Mount Calvary, take my place. Then I ask myself this question: who am I? Who am I that a king would bleed and die for? Who am I that he would pray not my If you'll be true, I'll give to you life forever.
Forever and forever. I know there's nothing that I could have done
To deserve God's only Son,
to
fight my battles until they're won. Who am I? Who am I that a king would bleed and die for? Who am I that he would pray,
He would pray.
not my will thine for?
The answer I may never know. Why He ever loved me so.
To an old rugged cross he would go,